Welcome to Scrubs to Riches podcast. I'm your host, Shelby. You can find me on Instagram at nurse_Shelbo. And we're going to talk on this episode about things they don't teach you in nursing school. And this is episode 3, entitled Investing. And in this, I am going to be talking about all the mistakes that I made as a brand new nurse, getting that first fat paycheck, and some of the things that I've done since that have helped me get to where I want to go and get me into the investing mindset and show you guys how I did it. So getting that first paycheck is unforgettable. It really made me feel like a sense of accomplishment, a sense that I finally made it. And to be honest with you, I feel like I waited my whole nursing school in order to just get that first paycheck, because what that meant for me is that I was in and more money was going to come, and I knew that I could pick up more and I could pretty much work whatever I want. So I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about some of the mistakes I made and what I'm doing now to ensure that I am on top of my investing career and I am able to work when I want and what type of area that I want to. So what I did when I got my first paycheck, the very first thing, I'll never forget this, is I went straight to Costco. I had just got a brand new apartment, my first one on my own, and I needed new furnishing. I wanted to celebrate a little bit, and I just pretty much just blew a third of it over at Costco. And do I regret it? No, absolutely not. But it started to make me build habits that I wasn't too happy about. So one of the things that I did is I bought the biggest TV I could afford at the time. And it was something that I was without. I remember in a dorm room, I had this little tiny, 24-inch TV, and I just knew one of the first things I wanted to do when I got that big paycheck was get a big TV. So I did that. I remember I filled up my bar that I had at home, and I bought a couple odds and ends, definitely some steaks, things like that. But I pretty much just spent it, on things that I didn't necessarily need, more so that I wanted. At first it worked, right? At first I was like, you know what? I can spend this. I'm just now off orientation. I can pick up shifts whenever I need. I can work whatever differential I need. And at the time with COVID, there was a bunch of incentives for me to take advantage of. So I knew that the money was going to be coming in more. I knew that I was going to take advantage of all that. I was spry. I had a whole lot of, what I felt momentum at the time, and I really wasn't that worried about it. But what I touched on earlier is that this started a cascade of habits that really was not conducive for me to avoid burnout, right? Because what I started to do is I started to justify spending that much because I would be able to make that up. But then what ended up happening is I got used to spending that, so I had to work higher. I had to work more and more. And that's when really things kind of got out of hand for me. So looking back, I realized that this was a dangerous cycle. More overtime meant more stress, meant more spending, meant more exhaustion. And it really didn't click for me until about 3 months in. And after 3 months, I realized, I'm sleeping more. I'm more irritable. Some of my personal relationships are lacking, and I knew that I just needed a change. So what I did is I started to research ways that I can properly and more responsibly save my money and make that money work for me. So in the beginning, I didn't know anything. My financial literacy was absolute zero. And I knew that this was going to be a learning curve. I knew that it was going to be some growing pains to it. So I started doing some research online, and I found a budget, the 50-20-30 rule. And it really helped me out a lot. And this is one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys. So 50% needs, right? So we're talking about rent, we're talking about phone bill, keeping the lights on, water, things like that, right? Pay off credit cards. And 30% is for fun, shopping, kind of things that I can get away with. That way, I can kind of reward myself, but with that 50% still having that take care of my bills. And then lastly, the 20% is just investing. I learned about index funds. I learned about real estate. I learned about high interest savings accounts, and I started to figure out which ones I wanted to do because, again, I had no experience at this at all. I'm pretty much the first one in my family to really think about what my money was going to be doing for me and how I can make it work for myself. So in getting started with investing, one of the first things that I had to realize was how much money I was making going to taxes. When you start working overtime, pretty much 50% of that goes straight to the government. Normally you're taxed like around 30%, depending on your tax bracket, just on your regular pay. But when you start doing overtime and things like that, you're taxed about 50%. I remember looking at one of my first checks that I had, 120 something hours on. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Big, nice, fat check. And little did I know, I did the math like 5 times. Little did I know that all of that was going to be, 50% of it was going to be given to the IRS essentially. I pretty much kissed that goodbye and I was shocked. And this is what really made me want to up my financial literacy game. I knew that I needed to start figuring out why this happened to me. So one of the great things about when you start getting into investing is there's so many avenues that you can do. As I mentioned earlier, there's index funds, and those are essentially like a portfolio of some of the top growing businesses in the world. So for instance, you may not be able to afford a share of Apple or a share of Microsoft or a share of Google or something like that. But if you go into the S&P 500, you are investing in that portfolio and you can get a piece of each one of those stocks every time you put something in. So as long as those 3 companies keep going up or at least break even, then you're not going to lose any money. Then I started getting into side hustles. I started thinking about construction, what I could do. I went back to bartending, and this was all while I was working as a full-time nurse, working overtime. So I had to get creative, and I started taking money under the table, and it kind of ended up crashing and burning because I ended up creating more stress and more commitments that I really couldn't say no to. So 5 years later, and here I am. I am a real estate investor. In January of this year, 2025, I bought my first rental property, and this rental property is in Michigan. It is a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and to be honest with you, I've never even seen it in person. I've seen inspection pictures of it. I've seen other pictures of it, and I've talked to my tenant a few times. I pretty much just am able to manage it all the way from California, and anything that goes wrong with it, I have a handyman that can help me out with that. I also have a team that I've been working with my mentor and using some of his contacts, and that's how I'm able to keep an eye on it, get things fixed if I need to, and in return, it cash flows me monthly. And not only that, one of the reasons I really like real estate is because of the tax advantages and the tax incentives. You see, the government wants you to create business. It wants you to create an income because they can tax it, right? So one of the things that they do is they incentivize. So there's a lot of different strategies, but you can do cash flow, obviously, is a way that you can get money. But also you can start getting tax advantages like depreciation, appreciation because my tenant pays my mortgage and I get a little bit of money outside of that. Insurance is paid for, mortgage is paid for, everything like that. Also, when my HVAC went out a couple months ago and I paid $1,000 to put in a new one, I'm going to get that as a write-off because in order for my business to work, I had to keep that in so that my tenant can stay in. So these are some of the tax advantages that real estate really gives me, and this is why I'm double downing on it. And at the end of this year or beginning of next year, I will be looking to get my first commercial real estate property. And I'll tell you guys more about that on a separate episode. So here's my biggest advice for nurses is watch out for lifestyle creep, right? So lifestyle creep is essentially you make more money, you spend more money, you get in debt, then you got to work more. And this was a big lesson for me to learn. And at sometimes, even as much as I know, I still slip up and I do it. This year, I have probably put in the most hours and made the most amount of money as a nurse through my W-2 this year. But I've been unbelievably stressed out, and I feel like the whole year has just went by. Now, granted, I have a goal for what I'm working for this year. I have a plan for it, and I plan to not work this much next year, at least bedside nursing. There was a means to an end. There was a purpose for it. So it's not all just because I'm spending it. I'm saving a lot of it. And when you have that lifestyle creep and you're in it, it feels like you cannot get out. Your debt starts going up. You have less money in your bank. And then inevitably things just go wrong, right? Like my HVAC that ended up blowing out. And before that, we thought it was a cold water issue, cold water pipe that burst. And so you have to be able to give yourself a little bit of cushion so you don't have to be stressed out and you don't need to be reactionary, right? Be proactive in some of the investments that you're going into so that you don't have to struggle or pull money out of something, it's something like steal from Paul to pay John, or however that saying goes. But it really is real. When you start doing investing, you're going to make your mistakes. You're going to do things that are going to make you feel like you're stepping backwards, but just keep in it, keep learning more and more about it. And you got to stick your neck out in order to get ahead. You really do. So in closing this up, nursing can be very rewarding. You can make really good money. You can be financially comfortable pretty much anywhere in the country, but you have to establish good habits if you want to survive this thing. If you don't want to be burnt out, you don't want to work bedside, you don't want your summers to just pass you by because you have to pay off these credit cards that you racked up, on a trip. You have to establish good habits. Now, with that 50-30-20 rule, I think that's a good place to start. I think that is a place where all of us can establish some good habits, make sure that all of our bills are paid, make sure we have a little bit of fun while doing it, and make sure that we're saving for our future, investing in our future. And, I would also say that self-improvement and learning more and more about finances and how money works, reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's a great book. Psychology of Money, it's another good book. Those will get you started and going kind of in a direction, and you can see where you kind of fit in from there. Also, starting to just talk about finances with people, they will come out of the woodworks. It's amazing the group of people that I have now, and the people that I've sat next to at dinners and talking about financing and talking about loans and what you can do and really how to take the most advantage of the situation that you're in. So after this episode, if you found any of this encouraging or helpful for you, I would love if you guys dropped a comment. Let me know if this is something that you guys have dealt with, how you fixed it, or if you have any other questions like that, please let me know. So thanks for tuning in to Scrubs to Riches podcast. Again, I'm your host, Shelby. Follow me at Instagram at nurse_Shelbo. And if you want to follow, feel free to comment below on this YouTube video or find me on Instagram, subscribe. You can DM me there if you want to. I'll talk more and more about some of the investments that I'm doing and how I've beat burnout and some of the tricks that I've done. And I'm really just trying to create a community, because one of the biggest conversations that I have with other nurses is that they're burnt out. They're burnt out. They don't like what they do. And I feel that when you don't have a touch on your finances, it just makes that much harder to get out. So if you haven't already, shoot subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and I look forward to hearing from you guys later. All right, peace.